69 cents a litre from midnight on Tuesday, and that's according to the Energy Department. It says diesel will drop by 53 cents and illuminating paraffin by 49 cents a litre, and this comes as the international oil prices continue to drop. It's been testing the $70 a barrel level. Have you ever had a dream to start a business and be successful? And did you know that it wasn't easy if you have never failed, that you would possibly not succeed? Today I speak to a man who's tried many business ideas and got it spot on, taking risk and sometimes failing, but trying again and again. My guest today is a business legend dubbed a serial entrepreneur, and he is the well-known owner and founder of the famous K-Mart Supermarket and Recording companies such as Moonshine Records and labor consultancy firm called Labor Link. And he's now doing well in the beauty therapy industry with Sorbet and selling franchises. Mr. Furh joins us on PM News. Good afternoon to you, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Colin.
Earlier when I spoke to you on the phone, you called me to order. You said I mustn't call you Mr. Furh. And I was just asking myself, for somebody who is respectable in the business world, tell us about your relationship with your workers when you started during the apartheid era, when you told them that you have a subservient mentality when they talk to their boss. You didn't want to be called boss or Mr. Why?
And that's exactly right. I was very young when I started out my first business, K-Mart. I was 22 years old only. So I didn't really have the respect of the workforce, and I had to earn that. And the only way I could do that was to try and understand the mentality and the psyche of the employees, and more importantly, to understand the socio-political environment in which we were working. It was 1976, just after the Soweto uprisings, and of course there was a lot of trauma in the country. So that was the tactic, was to try and really understand the people that I was dealing with, because I was very young and still very naive at the time.
During that time, you started a supermarket by stealing a K-Mart logo in the United States and violating copyright of K-Mart in their logo, and started a supermarket in South Africa.
Yeah.
Tell us about the first experience of when you started that business. The apartheid police came to disperse black people right here in Johannesburg. What happened?
That's right. We opened the store on the 1st of July 1976, which was just 2 weeks after the uprisings had started. So any gathering of black people would have caused some alarm with the police. So we had the store opening on the 1st of July, and we attracted thousands of people. And they were all gathered there in the center of town. And of course the police thought there was another riot taking place. So they came with the hippos and the dogs and everything else. And eventually we had to convince them that this was a store opening, it wasn't a riot. And then eventually we were able to settle everybody down and carry on with our opening.
You sold cheaper goods and at very low prices.
That's
and you
right.
attracted thousands of black people buying for you. What business model did you adopt, and how was the white people in South Africa, how were white people reacting to your kind of business? You're a white person doing business with black people, and I see there was a picture of you amongst black people. You were the only white person there. The issue of race relations and starting a small business with black people as the target market. How was the experience?
And the experience was actually fascinating, and obviously I was on a very steep learning curve because I had been brought up in a very white environment and completely in a bubble of superiority, I think you would like to call it. And I think at the time what I felt was that if we could just attract the people through discounting, because at the time very few people were discounting to the black market. So we tried that, and it really worked quite well because we were able to attract a lot of people into the store, but not many other whites knew what was going on about that at all.
Let's talk about the aspirations of many people who want to start business, and they know that it's not easy and they fail. You failed, you got liquidated.
Correct.
How was the experience?
It was very hard to fail and to be liquidated, particularly as a result of consumer boycotts. At the end of 1985, there were some very heavy consumer boycotts of white-owned stores. And of course, we were a white-owned store. And at the end of that year, our turnover was only about 15 or 20% of our budgeted turnover, so we just couldn't survive that. And we went into liquidation, and that was very hard. But looking back, I'd like to suggest that you need to fail at least once before you can become successful.
Now we've seen the logo of Sorbet right here on our screens. you started a company that had a concept that already existed.
Yes.
How did you enter the market with that concept when everybody was doing it? You start with massaging people and all that. It's quite obvious it's there. How are you different from others?
Okay, the market at the time was very fragmented. There were hundreds of little operators, individually owned operated stores. And there were no branded chains of any significance. And that's what we had to do, is we had to try and establish a branded chain and to try and differentiate ourselves from the rest of the market, and that's what we try to do.
Let's talk about labor relations in South Africa.
Yeah.
We've had many strikes, and it's about the interest of the workers so that they can have good working conditions, be paid well, and have living conditions. You started a labor consultancy about race relations in South Africa. What prompted that? Do you think it has helped to deal with the issue of racism at the workplace?
It certainly has. And at the time, I learned all that from K-Mart, the importance of understanding race relations in the workplace. And then I decided to go out and start a consultancy for public companies to try and help them with the same issues. For many managers at the time, particularly white managers, they didn't really understand the impact of racial polarization in the workplace. And I thought I could try and do something about that, and that's exactly what we did.
Mm-hmm. Now, just for a rep, you could do name dropping in terms of music artists that you have made famous, and your face wasn't known by then. The likes of Hugh Masekela, Letta Mbulu, Kefa Simenya, we can name them.
Exactly
Even when Whitney Houston started as a young artist. How did you get involved in the music industry, and did you really have to be rather knowledgeable about music?
I had learned retail of music. That was the thing. We were having a little record bar in the K-Mart store, so I was familiar with music. And at the time, Letta Mbulu was a very successful artist. And I was very fortunate that our partner, because we were one of the first people in South Africa to have black shareholders and partners, and he was able to introduce me to Letta and Caiaphas. They were visiting in Zimbabwe at the time, and we went up there and I met them, and we became very friendly. And ultimately, Caiaphas allowed us to distribute his and Letta's music in South Africa, and that's how it all started. In fact, I spoke to Caiaphas this morning on the telephone.
But he's probably watching right now. Just on a closing and parting shot,
yes.
There are many white people, rather young people who would like to start businesses. It's not easy out there. What is your message to them?
I think you need to be bold. You need to have what I call intuition. You need to be able to know that something is inherently right, even though you don't have the evidence to prove it. You need to have courage, because it's very hard. Sometimes it's easier to turn back than to push forward. And you need to have stamina, because it's something for the long haul. I think too many people want to become rich very quickly, and they don't realize that this is something you have to build over a long period of time.
Thank you very much for making time for talking to us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, I'm talking here to Mr. Ian Furh, who is a successful businessman who has been there and done that. And in his book, Get That Feeling, he takes you down memory lane during the apartheid era in the 1970s and his spell with the music industry, and so much to learn about starting a business and failing before tasting success. So he's the founder of the Sorbet, and he tells us a journey that has culminated in the creation of a truly inspirational brand. Mr. Ian Furh, right here on PM News.